until the
We
recording is okay, we're on. Okay, so thank you for joining us for building a new normal that promotes belonging, equity, diversity, and inclusion in online education. Our presenters today are Doctors Gabriela Mendez and Anymir Orellana from Nova Southeastern University. I will be your moderator for today. I am going to be monitoring the chat and um, con- keep us consistent with time by sharing time indicators in the chat. So at this time, our presenters are ready to go. So I'm just going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Flo. Thank you so much for that. Well, I think, thank you for the presentation. You know, Dr. Anymir Orellana and I and me, everybody knows us in here, I think. We are going to talk about building a new normal that promotes belonging, equity, diversity, and inclusion in online learning. Online education has seen a significant increase in the recent years, particularly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the online education has also highlighted issues of belonging, equity, diversity, and inclusion, because some students may not have the access to the necessary technology, knowledge, and support that they needed to fully participate in online learning. So to address these issues, online learning strategies that combine culturally relevant pedagogy and universal design for learning principles can be used. CRP and UDL complement each other to supplement BEDI. So in this, can you see the, let me see. Can you see the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, so what we are going to do is we're going to define these terms: belonging, equity, diversity, and inclusion. We're going to talk about learning environments that promote BEDI, as we short for these 4 terms. And we're going to present 2 frameworks that promote BEDI, CRP and UDL. And also we created a Google Doc with a list of resources for BEDI, and we're going to invite you to add more, because we're going to share the link at the end. So what are these terms? So belonging, as defined by Levy in 2007, sorry, I forgot to move to the next slide, I think. Yes, belonging, it's when students feel that they belong, they're part of, they feel close to or a part of, or they're happy at school, and they feel that their teachers or their professors care about them and treat them fairly and with respect. It's when they get along with their instructors and other students and they feel safe at the school. They feel that they're in a safe environment. Equity, as defined by the World Health Organization, is the absence of unfair, avoidable, or remediable differences among groups of people, whether these groups are defined in terms of socially, economically, demographically, or geographically, or by different dimensions such as sex, gender, gender identity, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, or others. So in terms of diversity, I don't know if most of you are in Florida, but we do have a diverse population, right? So, but the diversity means to have a presence of different people. Our university believes that diversity includes, but is not limited to, race, ethnicity, culture, religion, philosophy, gender, viewpoint, physical, economical, socioeconomic status, age, and sexual orientation, neurodiversity is something that we highlight too. And the differences in interpretations and reactions derived from diversity are important, as is also mutual respect for all. We consider in our university, and I should say that I am in the BEDI Council of the university, and we consider that diversity makes our university stronger and enrich the learning environments. When we focus on preparing individuals that live and work in a global society. So it's one of our strengths, the diversity. And that's something that we have to think, sometimes people think about diversity in a negative way, when we know and business know that having a diverse population means having an enriched opportunities, because there are different perspectives and different ways of seeing things. And so when you have a diverse team, you have a more creative team if the conditions are positive towards diversity, and if we have inclusion. So inclusion is the need to include people with different identities and characteristics. So we do have the diversity, but what do we do with that, right? To include is as defined in our university is to actively invite the presence and the participation of everyone. Diversity defines what we invite, which is variety, and inclusion represents the interaction, the mutual respect, the sense of community among those diverse groups that connect and are who we are. So diverse perspectives, including the diverse perspectives, welcoming them, creating a space where everyone can be who they are and they don't need to become like everyone else. That is what inclusion is. When you don't have to change who you are, you can be yourself and bring to the works or the class or whatever your own perspective. That is inclusion. So there are these two frameworks that care for belonging, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and that's what we're going to discuss today. And these frameworks are culturally relevant pedagogy, and I'm going to talk about that, and universal design for learning, and Dr. Anymir Orellana is going to talk about that one. So culturally relevant pedagogy addresses, it focuses on how we can address we can focus on incorporating the students' cultural backgrounds, experiences, their identity, and their context into the curriculum, while universal design for learning focuses on creating inclusive learning environments that meet the diverse needs of all students. So these two frameworks have a lot of similarities. They intersect, they overlap in many things, but they have different focuses. While CRP is a pedagogical framework that situates the curriculum in the context and promotes social and political awareness and engagement to foster a better society, UDL provides guidelines that helps us create inclusive learning environments that meet diverse learning needs, like minimizing curriculum barriers to maximize learning. So an instructional learning environment that combines both approaches can be effective to address and implement BEDI. And there is no one single way of doing it, of implementing both frameworks, but one approach could be to implement culturally relevant pedagogy framework, and while creating and designing the instructional and learning environments, For example, the learning outcomes, instructional strategies and assessments, thinking if and how we can address the UDL principles and guidelines. So what is culturally relevant pedagogy, or what is this framework? So basically, CRP emphasizes academic achievement by expressing high expectations for all students, regardless of our own ideas of or our implicit biases that we should explore. Not limiting the academic achievement just to the standardized measures that are imposed on us, but focusing on learning and safe environments that promote learning, and not on control, discipline, and numbers, statistics on what scores we have to achieve. So in culturally relevant pedagogy, teachers are aware of their implicit bias, and they make sure these don't affect their students. Teachers link students' experiences and connect them with what students need to learn. That is cultural competency. Teachers scaffold and build bridges between what the students need to learn and their culture and their previous knowledge. And teachers appreciate their own identity and their students' cultures and identities, and use them to facilitate learning without assuming that all groups are the same. Sometimes we say, okay, all the Hispanic kids are the same. No, that's not culturally relevant pedagogy. Culturally relevant pedagogy, you get to know your students and their specific cultures, and you don't assume it heterogeneity. And the students and the courses and the professors do not expect that the students adapt completely to the school and stop being themselves. They work to adapt to the students and to learn about their students' needs and culture. A goal of learning for CRP is to improve society by combating injustice, and learning is situated in the historical, cultural, and social political context. So teaching is not political neutral. So the students and the teachers know that we are in political context, and that is not ignored, that is used to promote learning and to promote a better society. And now my colleague, Dr. Anymir Orellana, is going to explain universal design for learning. Did I go too far? Oh no, are you presenting now? Yes.
Can everybody see the screen here? I shifted to.
Yes, perfect.
All right, thanks, Dr. Mendez. Well, she briefly explained about CRP, and now let me give you a very brief introduction to universal design for learning. Universal design, the term, is an architectural term, right? It followed from it referred to the environments and products that are designed to be accessible or usable by almost everyone without the need for accommodations. Examples are, the escalators, the mechanic escalators, the doors, the ramps. So the universal design was meant for these products in physical accessibility to these resources. And according to universal design, their notion is that what is essential for some is almost always good for all. And environments can be disabling, but well-designed environments are not. So through the design of the environment, we can provide, for the most part, for almost everyone, the access to these resources. CAST, which is the authors of the UDL, Universal Design for Learning, then used these notion of universal design to design guidelines to help increase the accessibility in educational accessibility for students with disabilities, right? With learning disabilities. Later on, they expanded the guidelines to work and worked to provide a set of suggestions to help reduce curricular barriers and address a wider range of diverse learners, not necessarily learners with disabilities, but for the majority, right? So the notion that we have this variability in our classrooms from disabled, not non-disabled, and through learning preferences and characteristics, if you will, of the environment. And the way that UDL addresses this is by design, right? The design of the curriculum, the materials, and the learning resources. So UDL shifts the focus from a special design features for a few, like perhaps the disabled, to designing for many, so the majority can benefit from the design, right? And so UDL is scientifically based. It's an approach, a scientific-based approach for teaching and learning. Again, it aims at minimizing barriers to maximize inclusive learning. Inclusive because the framework aims at addressing that diversity. And what Gabriela was saying, you know, the diversity is the presence of these differences, and inclusion is the act of accepting them and in designing, in this case, UDL for that diversity. It's based on the premise, again, that there is learner variability. We will find, especially online in online education, where we have students for different geographical regions, from different backgrounds, cultural specifically, we have to acknowledge, or at least assume, that we will have that variability in our classroom. And like what Dr. Mendez was saying is, we are going to design our assessments as authentic experiences based on the needs, the cultures, and characteristics of the students. We have to, we should embrace that diversity. And the premises or the guidelines, the UDL guidelines, are based on what they call the brain networks, right? Interrelated networks, and specifically, hold on, these are the networks that UDL, the theory behind, right? So there's the affective network, the why of learning. With the affective network, is say that when we recognize that students have multiple means of engaging or understanding why they have to learn, right? We provide multiple means of engagement to stimulate the interest and motivate the learners and help them become purposeful and motivated. The recognition network, the what of learning, when we present information and content in different ways, we help the learners become resourceful and knowledgeable. When we give these options, they're able to select what is best for them. For example, we should have in our courses different ways of representing the content, visuals, auditory, and text, so that the learner can experience their ways of representing how they learn or what they're learning as content presented to them. And multiple means of action and expression is the strategic network, the how of learning, right? When we differentiate, when we differentiate the ways that students can express what they know, okay? We understand that some students are better at speaking, others are writing, maybe at hands-on. So we should have students experience a variety of ways of expressing what they know. So the premises of UDL is that as we design our courses and we provide multiple means of engagement, representation, actions, and expressions, we can provide multiple paths in our courses and therefore hopefully address a variety of a wider range of learners, as if we only had one choice. For example, if in our classes, we only have engagement in individual work and we only provide text, and we only give written assignments as actually an expression, there's only one path, only one type of learner, if you will, or a preference will benefit from that style. Whereas if we provide multiple means, the combinations are wider, and hopefully we address a wider variety of learners. So that's in a nutshell and very quickly what UDL is about. Now, the guidelines and what Dr. Mendez was saying is that as CRP is broad in how it addresses the cultural aspects and social political, the differences in cultures of our students in our curriculum. UDL provides a little bit more detailed guidelines into how or ideas to implement the principles. So if you see on screen, there is for each of the brain style, if you will, the brain networks that they have according to their theories, each multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, and providing multiple means of engagement are the three principles of UDL. Each principle has three guidelines. So we should provide options for recruiting and interest, in multiple means of engagement, sustaining effort and persistence, and self-regulation. Within each guideline, then there's a set of checkpoints. And I'm going to show, if you don't mind, I'm going to show the screen. It's better if I show you quickly so you can have access to that. I'm in the website. Can you see this? This is a web page. This is udlguidelinescast.org. I recommend,
yes,
if you want to look into it further, this is an excellent resource. They not only present each of the principles, they have the research that supports it. And mind you that there are mixed findings in the literature. Some say it is, some say it's not that beneficial, but mainly because it's a very comprehensive network framework. And we can't, there's multiple ways of implementing it and reporting on it. So I was in my work, I've only focused on this little piece, offer alternatives, auditory information. I'll click on that. So let's say in your curriculum, your framework is CRP, I keep saying CPR, CRP. And as you develop the assignments, the objectives, the learning outcomes, and materials within your process of what Dr. Mendez and I are proposing is that you think in how you can provide multiple means of engagement, representation, and or action and expression as you design your course with this CRP as the main umbrella. So let's say that you have this assignment that addresses cultural, social, political, what the CRP framework works, and you think about providing multiple means of representation. And let's say you are focusing on providing alternatives for auditory information. So let me go back. Multiple means of representation is providing different means with the same material, right? Or the same material, different means by perception, language, and symbols. For example, if you have students who have different cultural backgrounds and they speak a different language, how about promoting understanding across languages by providing subtitles? So they give you ideas on how you can promote understanding across languages and in turn help you provide multiple means of representation, right? So I'm not going to go through the checkpoints one by one, but the guidelines are, in my opinion, they've grown, they've become more precise, and what is different, if you will, is what technology you can use to implement what they call the checkpoints, right? For example, I've worked on this, use text equivalents in the form of captions or speech to text for spoken language. Okay, so that means that your videos should be captioned. And if you have visuals, diagrams, you should provide alt text, alternative text. If you have audios, you should provide the transcripts. So you're providing the text and the audio and the visual and the audio. So multiple means of representation for diverse learners. Well, I don't know if that makes sense. So I encourage you to go there and revisit or visit, I'm sorry. And I think some of you are already familiarized with UDL. So that's in a nutshell, really quick, what UDL is about. And I think we have 5 minutes or so, Gabby.
Yes, can you share? Can you go to the next slide and share the presentation? Oh, or you don't have it?
Okay.
Okay.
So here it is.
So, yes.
So in a nutshell, we're going to finalize with some strategies and ideas, keeping in mind that there's a combination, some overlap, but if it's a CRP strategy, then think how UDL can strengthen it. I would say that's the word.
So, for example, we thought, from a culturally relevant pedagogy, you need to communicate clear goals and high expectations to all students, right? So how do we do that when we think about UDL? So how do we express those expectations? That is important. You have to make sure that every student knows that you expect them to do well, and you know they can do well, and we have to express that in different ways throughout the course. We also need to provide flexibility in how students demonstrate learning, and I think Anymir showed different ways, and when she talked about using different kinds of assignments, right? We are very focused on the learning and on the essay, or in K to 12, it's all multiple choice, but there are different ways in which the students can demonstrate their learning, from projects, portfolios, videos, all these amazing technology tools, creating an ebook, all the things can be done. And sometimes we are very, very limited to one way of assessments. We need to engage our students in their learning and their assessment process. So they need to know what they are expected to learn, but they also should be involved in how they are assessed. And so you could use rubrics and ask them to self-assess their work. You can have individual conferences and ask them about, okay, what are your weaknesses, what are your strengths first, and then weaknesses, and then what goals do you want to set for yourself, for example. We need to provide support to ensure that all learners can access the materials, and then technology and the environment. This means that all the materials have to be accessible in the way that Dr. Orellana was talking about. She works a lot. She does a great job with making sure that all presentations, her PowerPoint presentations, have the scripts. She teaches us how to do that, how to make sure that the materials are in a way that everybody can access them. But it's also about, making sure the students know how to use the technology, and that the environment, it's helping the students. If our classes are all messed and students have to click in 10 different things to find what they had to find, that's not an environment that promotes learning. And we have to make learning personally and culturally relevant by linking it to personal experiences, to their community context, and to issues of power, right? Like nowadays, it's impossible to talk about to be a professor and not to involve your students, your college students, on what is happening with the universities in Florida. Like teachers, instructors can say something, cannot say something, all this context. Those are things we can use to learn. And we can incorporate diverse perspectives. We should incorporate the diverse perspectives and resources in our course materials. Make sure not all your authors look the same, are from the same region of the world, and belong to one specific group. We have different voices, and our students need to see themselves represented in different voices and different pictures in different perspectives. And we had to create a variety of opportunities for students to connect with another, with their instructors, and with their content knowledge, different activities, different kinds of discussions, different formal and informal forums of discussion. And we should empower our students by modeling democracy, teaching them to think critically, to advocate for themselves and for others, and to engage in civil and community activities. And of course, use materials and assessment that represents your students' identities, culture, and interests. And a way of learning about that is at the beginning when you create a survey. So we created also a repository of resources, and we started including some resources there, but we welcome you to include as many resources as you want. You can use, this is a Google Doc, and any of you can go and use those resources and add more, because we're sure you know much more. Sorry, time is up, and we wanted to discuss more strategies, and I think we talked too much. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mendez and Orellana, for your presentation. This has been an interesting overlap of ideas between culturally relevant pedagogy and universal design for learning in the BEDI that you have shared, how we can help students to belong, to offer equitable support, and acknowledge diversity and inclusion. We had a captive audience with us today, so I'm just going to ask if you have any questions to just drop them in the chat. Please visit the resource on Google Docs, and most of all, to evaluate the session on the Engages platform. Thank you for your time and attention. And I think we are at lunch, so if you have questions before you go, you can go ahead and share those.
I just included the link in the chat, the link to the Google Doc. Someone asked me for one.
Yes,
Excellent
thank you so much.
presentation, Gabi and Anymir.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria.
Thanks for being here. We know that
Yes.
there's a choice elsewhere.
Ladies,
Yes,
I
thank you.
enjoyed it, and I have my takeaway, which I'm going to be using with one of my students.
Yes, and you know, Gabriela and I have we brainstorming in this and the potential in both combining both frameworks. Is not, you know, it's not something that hasn't been done. It's we didn't see much of it in online learning. And the approaches are different. Some of them just overlap. But in our case, wanting to, from my perspective, with UDL in general, and then bringing her perspectives from the CRP, it was, to me, was very fascinating. And I thank Gabby for teaching me about that framework in particular, in making the technology and making the ideas more accessibility and inclusive experiences from UDL, more, if you will, the side of the relevance of the cultural relevance, right? And not just designing our courses, because my background is in quality online courses and designing it, and the, if you will, the quantitative part of it, or the observable part of it. And she brings that social, more the cultural aspect of our learning experiences, which I thank her for introducing me to CRP.
Mm-hmm. And I see the next thing will be the social justice part.
Well, it's a tough agenda, you know, given, I don't know, we're in Florida, right? And you know, it's a lot going on with it. We'll see how we can make it
Thank you so much, ladies.